Good morning, everybody. What a great crowd. This is great to see. So nice to see everyone here and on Zoom. We've got several folks joining us remotely today. I want to welcome Sherry, Debbie's sister, who's visiting with us this week, and Ella, Ted's daughter, who's with us this week, and Elena. Who's about to celebrate a birthday. Happy birthday. But we won't sing because she would really be mad. Okay, we are going to start off with our Rotary Minute from Sonia. I'm going to bring.
Good morning. How many of you know that Rotary actually has two slogans for the what Rotary means to them? We all know that service above self is one of them. Do you, what the other one is? Okay, I'll read this to you and then you can see. It says the other Rotary is service above self, and one profits most from who serve the best. That is Rotary's official motto, can be traced back to the early days of the organization. In 1911, the second Rotary Convention was held in Portland, Oregon. Approved, he profits most who serves best as the Rotary motto. The wording was adapted from a speech that Rotarian author Frederick Sheldon delivered to the first convention held in Chicago the previous year. Sheldon declared that only the science of right conduct toward others pays. Business is the science of human services. He profits most who serves his fellows best. The Portland gathering also inspired the motto, service above self. During an outing on the Columbia River, Ben Collins, president of the Rotary Club of Minneapolis, talked with Seattle Rotarian J.E. Pinkham about the proper way to organize a Rotary Club, offering the principle his club had adopted, service, not self. Pinkham invited Rotary founder Paul Harris, who was also on the trip, to join their conversation. Harris asked Collins to address the convention, and the phrase service, not self was met with great enthusiasm. At the 1950 Rotary International Convention in Detroit, Michigan, two slogans were formally approved as official mottos of Rotary. He profits most who serves best, and service above self. The 1989 Council on Legislation established service above self as the principal motto because it best conveys the philosophy of unselfish volunteer service. He profits most who serves the best was modified to they profit most who serve best in 2004 to its current wording, one profits most who serves the best in 2010. So there are two Rotary mottos, which I didn't know until I was asked to do this.
Thank you, Sonia.
I didn't know that either. I think that's one of the joys of the Rotary Minute is we all, when we were assigned it, we discover something new about Rotary, and there's always something new to discover. All right, and next up we have Rick with our inspiration.
Good morning. About 10 years or so ago, I had the opportunity to serve on the Board of Trustees for Rock Point School. Rock Point School is located in Burlington, and it's a non-traditional boarding school that serves students from a variety of different backgrounds, but they've one thing in common. They've all struggled in the traditional school setting, and Rock Point has provided a place for them to meet in a very caring and supporting environment. During my time on the board each year, there was a graduation, and which was a very special event. In fact, there were so many tears of joy during these events that the staff handed out tissue boxes for everyone coming into the graduation. For many years, a portion of a book that was written by Robert Fulgham was read by the school's history teacher, Gus Buchanan. It was entitled, "All I Really Need to Know I Learned in Kindergarten." So I'd like to read a portion of that book. All I really need to know about how to live and what to do and how to be, I learned in kindergarten. Wisdom was not at the top of graduate school mountain, but there in the sand pile at Sunday school. These are the things I learned. Share everything, play fair, don't hit people, put things back when you found them, clean up your own mess, don't take things that aren't yours, say you're sorry when you hurt somebody, wash your hands before you eat, flush, warm cookies and cold milk are good for you, live a balanced life, learn something and think something and draw and paint and sing and dance and play and work every day some. Take a nap every afternoon. When you go out into the world, watch out for traffic, hold hands and stick together. Be aware of a wonder. Remember the little seed in the styrofoam cup? The roots go down, the plants go up, and nobody really knows how or why, but we're all like that. Goldfish and hamsters and white mice, and even the little seed in the styrofoam cup, they all die, so do we. And then remember the Dick and Jane books, the first word you learned, the biggest word of all. Of course, Dick and Jane was, that was my time. That may, for the younger people, but anyway. The biggest word of all was look. Everything you need to know is there somewhere. The golden rule and love and basic sanitation, ecology and politics and equality and sane living. Take any of those items and extrapolate it into sophisticated adult terms and apply it to your family life or your work or your government or your world, and it holds true and clear and firm. Think what a better world it would be if we all, the whole world, had cookies and milk about 3 o'clock every afternoon, and then lay down with our blankies for a nap. Or if all governments had as a basic policy to always put things back where they found them and to clean up their own mess. And it's still true, no matter how old you are, when you go out into the world, it's best to hold hands and stick together.
Thank you. That was terrific. And now Andy is going to talk to us about a project that we're going to do in reaction to the speaker that we had last week, Chief Collette.
Thank you, Susan. So I think we were all inspired last week with Chief Collette and the stories and the firefighters and the pictures and all the heroism of and selflessness that everybody gave to rescue those that were impacted by the flood and the terrible storms. So there's a decision to write thank you letters from the club to our local fire department. I have a list of 32 names. We have more than 32 Rotarians. I don't know if they're all here. So in lieu of a hat, I'm going to pass the plate, and there is a name of a local Williston firefighter. So if you would grab one, write a thank you letter, bring it here. We'll collect them all, make sure that everybody, I've got my list, so we want to make sure everybody's going to get a letter. We'll then deliver it, and I think we were going to add a food basket or something, an additional a gift of gratitude from the Rotary Club. So I'll start here. Yes.
So deadline, I need deadline. Yeah.
Yeah, if we come back next week, I mean, there's no real deadline. Bring your letters next week, or get them to me or somehow. I don't know how you do it.
Can we bake something to add to the basket, or are we opening this up?
What do you think? I hadn't thought through the basket. My thought was just to get something from somewhere, but
we won't preclude it if anybody wants to. Well, we'll stay in touch. Leslie, we'll figure that out. So I'll start here and we'll make it go around. Thank you, everybody. Yep,
What you said, the letter, you mean thank you card?
thank you
or-
card.
Okay.
Yeah. A couple of lines of heartfelt thank you would be great.
Purchase something?
Bill, there's a rumor that you purchased some thank you cards. Can you confirm or deny? Okay. See Phil, if you would like a card or otherwise. Absolutely, you may take more than one, but maybe everybody, so yes, I don't think we have there.
I'll take one now and if there's.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Thank you, Sally. Other questions, thoughts, issues? Thank you, everybody.
And I'll just note that this list of fire department employees includes people in every type of role. So I don't know, in the little notes, does it say what their job is?
Yeah,
And-
I don't understand it.
Okay.
I'm gonna guess that if others here know more than I do, there's an FC for Chief Colette. I'm assuming that's fire chief. There's a DC, a cap, CPT is captain, lieutenant, senior FF is firefighter. So you'll see, when you see the things, it'll say senior FF, senior firefighter. with his name.
And I think it also includes like, there might be office staff or, so it's basically, we're thanking everyone in the
Yeah,
department.
but almost everybody on here is a firefighter or
Mhm.
has a captain or fire chief designation.
You can Google them.
Which you call staff members on there.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
And I
Yeah.
would guess that para means paramedic.
Yeah.
My guess. Yeah, and I have AEMT. Advanced. Advanced.
Okay. Excellent, yeah. And Andy, did you also want to just describe the project you just completed with the, sorry.
I think it's going in there, party.
Yeah.
I will.
I don't know if I'm authorized to ring it, but as an ex-president, I suppose that, it's a lifetime appointment, right? So full authority. Susan asked me to update everybody on a club project that we did last Saturday and Sunday at the Cathedral Square, the memory care unit at Allenbrook. And I want to thank the people that were there, Elizabeth and Sherry and Jen and Andy and Ashley. Did I miss anybody? So together they had a big unruly garden. They're no longer able to maintain it. So we stripped it all down, put some top seed and soil in. Altogether, there were 19 Rotarian hours used at Cathedral Square. Somebody did, yes.
I have to say, most of the work was done by Ashley and Andy. Because we were there for a couple hours, each of us. These guys were there. If you saw what it was, we left and there was still a lot to do, and they did it. So kudos to
Yeah, I second what Sherry said, they did double, at least.
triple, quadruple, yeah.
It's pretty
Big time. We took flowers. They did everything.
He's not here yet.
Okay.
I did confirm yesterday that Peter Welch says he's gonna be here. They've got, in fact, he's bringing two staffers with him. So that's what you get to do when you're a US Senator.
Such a great speaker. Yes, we've got you.
Okay. Well, oh, there he is. Oh, I'll go get him. Vamp, talk amongst yourselves.
It's a whirlwind.
Who wants another one? I thought Mike.
Oh. Dave wants.
Good morning, Peter. How are you? Thanks. Morning. Good morning.
So here they are.
How are you?
Here they are.
So these guys can get a breakfast.
Oh, yeah.
Get a couple of coffees.
Yeah, please do.
Started?
Um, no, but I'm gonna do my impersonation of Bernie Sanders while you're going. What's that? My stuff predates the mittens. But anyway, but yeah, get a cup of coffee, get breakfast, make yourselves at home. We're a low key crowd, so.
We have a seat for them?
Yeah, that's what I was.
Okay.
What's that? In my seat. I actually do have a Bernie Sanders impersonation. So it was 1986. I'm covering Bernie as mayor of Burlington for WWPV, St. Michael's College Radio, as majoring in journalism. And I went to one of his press conferences, and it was some sort of Burlington International Workers' Day or some such thing. And I actually asked, well, Mayor Sanders, why are we doing something like this when, the streets, everybody remember the pothole bandit? It was a guy who planted plants in the potholes in Burlington to demonstrate how bad they were. So I said, well, we have a pothole bandit. Why aren't we worried more about streets and sidewalks? And Bernie said back, well, it's certainly important to worry about our streets and sidewalks, but how can we merely be concerned with our streets and sidewalks when the Reagan war machine, and he was gone. And I thought, this guy is going to be in the US Senate someday. So anyway, so Senator, we have chairs over there. There's one here, wherever. And I'll proceed with my lengthy introduction. Yeah. So same situation, actually. I met Peter Welch when I was in college. I was covering news events in the Capitol during the Cunin administration, and Peter Welch had become president pro tem of the Vermont State Senate, the first Democrat ever to hold that position. Since then, he's actually been called quite recently in Politico, a fellow US senator called him the quote, nicest dude in DC. And I can say that that's exactly right. I would track down, and we've been told it's okay to call you Peter. Okay. I would track him down, and he knew who I worked for and that I didn't have any listeners, but he would give me interviews anyway. Fast forward to 1988, I've graduated from St. Mike's. I'm working in Senator Leahy's office, and I've said before, and it's literally true, I was so high up that I got to answer the phones when the receptionist went to lunch. And so I'm in that capacity when the phone rings, and it's State Senate Pro Tem Peter Welch calling for Senator Leahy. And I said, well, Peter, it's Ted Kenny. And he remembered me. And he said, oh, what are you doing? So we talked for a second. He says, well, listen, I'm running for Congress. It's 1988. I've got a fundraiser in DC. Why don't you come? And I said, I'm working full time and I'm going to law school at night. I'm starving to death and I have no money. And he said, well, come anyway. It's okay. So I did. When I brought, and I said, can I bring my roommates? So we all crashed a fancy Washington DC house right on Capitol Hill, and sat in the corner. And Peter wowed the crowd as he would with his earnestness and truth telling. And he afterwards, though, he came over and he hung out with us, this group of 20-something Vermonters, for about 30 minutes, and just was very genuinely interested in us, and it was a wonderful gesture. Peter, as I have described in my own political career, more times than I wish to remember, in that campaign, Peter came in second. He didn't win, but he did win in 2006, and he became a U.S. congressman. In 2008, he's running for re-election, and I am marching with him and his wife, Margaret, in the Williston 4th of July parade with my daughter, Ella, who's here today. Which is a good lesson, that your kids will hang out with you if if a U.S. senator is involved. But we're marching, and near the end of the parade, one of my fellow Vermonters yells from the crowd, hey, Peter, why don't you pick up a copy of the Constitution? Read that, put down your copy of Das Kapital. And Peter actually just nodded and said, thank you, good to see you. And I asked him afterwards, that was pretty impressive. And he said, well, he's a constituent. He has a right to say what he wants to say, and I have an obligation to hear him. And that was very impressive to me. Since becoming a U.S. Senator, and before that, when he was in Congress, in the House, Peter has done exceptional job of trying to take the heat out of politics. Actually good friends with Alabama Republican Senator Katie Britt. He was quoted recently as saying, I like Mitch McConnell. That's kind of rare for yeah. But he is I don't want to say, though, that to be the nicest dude in DC actually takes strength. John F. Kennedy once reminded us that civility is not a sign of weakness. And we need to be reminded of that, because oftentimes when people are civil in public life, it is misperceived as weakness. And it's actually a sign of additional strength. He is focused on affordability, childcare services in Vermont, climate change, democracy, and living wage and economic growth. So without further ado, I give you the nicest dude in DC, U.S. Senator Peter Welch.
Hi. I want to thank you for doing that. It's great to be here. This nice guy stuff, it can go a little too far. So that nicest dude, it was John Fetterman who said that. It was a funny little piece. Situation requires that I can be mean. Okay. A couple of things. One, just on taking off on what Ted was talking about. The politics in the country is dismaying to all of us, and the kind of meanness and the unwillingness to listen is really disturbing. And we don't have that in Vermont, fortunately, but it's something that is really precious, because it's an essential ingredient, I think, of a democracy, that you have trust and respect. All right, that it isn't just about, quote, being nice. It's about how does a community, how does a society address what are really difficult challenges. And the climate change is an example. That's a real problem, because there's disruption. We've been a couple of 100 years on fossil fuels. We can't stay on them. We've got to go to clean energy. But all these systems have been established that were based on a carbon intensive energy system. And a transition is a challenge. And what one of the tools of trying to persuade is to also reassure that folks who are whose lives have been organized around a carbon economy, make the journey to where we have to go. And one of the examples I have of that is that I was on the Energy and Commerce Committee in the House, and that was the major committee that had dealt with climate change. And I had a Republican colleague from West Virginia, and that's coal country. So he was against the EPA, he was for coal, but he was also really a fantastic colleague on energy efficiency matters. And having energy efficiency, if we do that right with the right appliances, with insulating our homes, with all these things that actually do create local jobs, that's 40% reduction in carbon emissions if we are very aggressive on it. So it's really meaningful. He was an incredibly good ally on energy efficiency because you didn't get into debates about what fuel you're using. You know, whatever fuel you're using, if it's efficient, you use less, not more. And that means savings, not more expenditures. I went with him to West Virginia, spent the night at his house, and we went down into a coal mine, the Harrison coal mine in West Virginia. And the experience was you get in this elevator and go down about 1,000 feet. Then you get on this little coal car and you ride on it for 4.5 miles to get to a coal seam, where I spent the afternoon with the coal workers who were mining that seam. And they hazed me a little bit because 2 miles in, they stopped the car and turned the lights and the headlamps off. And I was terrified. I mean, that is the tomb-like situation. But what happened is that we came out after and had lunch, and I was with these coal miners who were the hardest working people that I've met, other than dairy farmers in Vermont. You know what I mean? So I totally got it. And the fact that I was there was an indication that my concern about climate change was not about taking away jobs, or it was about making that transition. And it really created a lot of goodwill for me in the committee, where when I then was making my case for various bills, there wasn't this suspicion that Peter just doesn't care about our jobs. And that's a kind of thing that Vermonters do, right? I mean, we respect the situation and we kind of acknowledge the reality that our neighbors have or other people have. And it's essential, I think, in order to create that trust that's required to make the risky decision to make the changes that we need. Now, it's all got intensified with what's happened since January 6th. That's emblematic. But that whole battle goes on. I mean, the attack on the Capitol was an attack, and I was, you know, in the building at the time when the shots were fired. It was 20 feet from me, just the floor below me, right below me. I was there when folks were banging the doors down, and we really didn't know what was going to happen. We saw the glass shattering. And even as this was happening, and I was there, and I was kind of scared, I didn't believe it was happening. You know, when something that just can't happen is happening, it's like you don't believe it. And I couldn't believe in the United States of America, we were actually having a violent attack on the Capitol, and that it was about overturning an election. So that's a serious situation, obviously, that has not stopped. That the challenge to us of keeping our democracy afloat really continues. And that is going to be something that continues to require engagement of citizens and leadership, really at the local level, not just at the national level. So there's a lot of challenges that we face that continue in Washington. And my hope is to carry on. You know, it's a big shoes to fill with Senator Leahy, 48 years. By the way, the first political campaign I worked in was his campaign. When I first came to Vermont, I was a volunteer in Windsor County, and I met Marcel and Patrick at the Hotel Coolidge that's still there. And 48 years later, Patrick walks me down the aisle to escort me to take the oath of office to replace him in the U.S. Senate. It's kind of a nice Vermont little story. So it's been fantastic to serve in Vermont in the state Senate and Congress, and Ted now in the U.S. Senate. And but the high point was definitely marching in the Williston Parade with Ted and Ella. So I'm going to stop there and we'll open up for questions, but it's really, really nice to be with you. And thank you so much for having me. And this is such a great place. Yes, sir. Thank you.
So being the temporal kind of person that we're talking about the temperature of our government these days, what kinds of things do you feel like we can do to help get everybody to the process of doing what we need to be doing rather than bickering?
Well, you know, that's the heart of the matter. And I think there's two things. Number one, the way I approach it is the way Vermonters approach it. I start out like talking to my colleagues with an assumption, look, they're no different than me. They got elected by the people they represent. So if I want them to respect me because I want them to respect Vermonters, you know, you decided to send me down there and I want to be taken seriously in that role. I have to do the same, start there. But then my first question to my colleagues that are saying deep red districts is not, how could you possibly support Trump? All right. I ask them, how's broadband in your rural area? Or what's happening with the community hospitals in your area? And that then results in them having an answer that is an answer I'd give if they asked me the question about broadband in Vermont. You know, we had a real struggle with that. We're making a lot of progress. But the point is, every one of us represents people. And when you look at what those people need, and it's our job to help them, right? Every one of them needs pretty much the same things. But if you get into what has now become sort of a really a topic about you know, the presidential race or the contentious politics, then that sort of stops the conversation. And what I find is that at the local level, by and large, I mean, it's getting a little different with the stuff that's going on at school boards and even select boards now. But what I find is that the starting point is to try to identify the common challenges that the people face that I represent, and I know are the same things for people in their district. And then that gets you talking about, all right, how do we get better broadband? So like, I'll just give an example. In the House before COVID, and we were having such a challenge to get broadband deployed, I created the broadband caucus. It was, you know, it was 20 Republicans, 20 Democrats. And my theory was we needed more than just the Vermont representative in order to make a compelling case. In every one of these Republicans that I went to and talked to them about the broadband, they were all on board because they had the same challenges as we had here in Vermont. So that's kind of my way of approaching things. And I think it works. I think instinctively we do that a lot in Vermont. You know, it can get very heated, obviously at a select board or even the state legislature. But if you start with that question about what are our shared challenges, then you're having a discussion about how to solve them as opposed to you're wrong, I'm right. Hey, Jean, how are you? Good to see you.
I sort of know the answer to this question because we talked about it with the side of the meeting, but could you tell us that we're used to you representing us now for so long in Washington. It's been wonderful. But what are the major differences you see between representing us in the House and representing us in the Senate, other than the wonderful joy of not having to run every 2 years?
Well, I'll tell a story about the 2 years. I was up in, we did this wonderful event up at Hill Farmstead in Greensboro, you know, the brewery with Jasper Hill cheese, deep in the heart of the kingdom. So we're at Hill Farmstead. There's about 150 people there, and they're serving beer. So I'm on the clock still, and I have to give my talk. So I asked everyone there, should I have a beer? And I happen to like Hill Farmstead. Who doesn't, right? So people go, yes, have a beer, have a beer. So I go over and I get myself a beer and I pop it and I take a sip and I say, this is what's called a 6-year term. There's two things. One is particular to now and one that's institutional. There's a real a benefit to the smaller size, at least for me, because it's so much of politics is personal relationships. But in the Senate, it's so much smaller. And what I'm finding that is really good, and this is about the particular moment we're in politically, is when I talk to a Republican, they have agency. If they want to work on something with me, or it's an issue we care about together, right? They can act. So, you know, I passed a bill that's related to this horrible opioid crisis we have with Ted Cruz, right? That's not what I thought would be top of the agenda, but we agree on this particular issue, all right? And in the House right now, it's kind of a mob scene in a way where it's the ideological battles in the investigations, and it's a lot of fights where at the end of the day, no one wins the fight. Being in a fight means you're lost. It's kind of a top-down situation right now. And I hope that starts to change because we need that. So the small size, the intimacy, it feels, and we're in the majority, but in the House, if you're in the minority, it's really tough to get anything significant on the agenda. So it's a good place where I feel like I can be more helpful to Vermont. Yeah, yes.
Two things. First of all, I'm so proud of living in Vermont and the three of you that represent us.
Thank
here,
you.
because I feel like there's some civility and common sense. On the other hand, I can't believe that any of these people that are behaving so badly would be able to keep a regular job anywhere, because nobody hires someone to just complain. So thank you. Thank you.
That's true.
For being
Thanks.
a voice of reason. The other question I have is, I know that you know about this. We've had major problems here with our mail delivery.
Oh my God, it's terrible. Yeah.
Huge problem. And I think Williston was one of the first towns that, you know, were exposed
It was.
to that sort of thing.
Right.
We all understand that they don't have enough people to work there, and we understand that. Some of us actually offered to come in and try and help them. They said, you can't, because there are all these, you know, requirements that you have to be vetted and whatever else. You can't just walk in and start doing people's mail. Do you have any hope for a change at the top that would recognize that we need to do something dramatically different if this isn't working?
Well, first of all, I know we're getting incredible number of complaints about mail service. Williston has been a major center for that. So our office is hearing about that all of the time. There's the whole variety of things that some of the Postal Service is making, some are not. But start with the funding of the post office has lagged behind. I mean, there were operational issues where instead of first class mail, people use emails, and that's hurt the revenue. Okay, so that's a practical issue that there's got to be some accommodation to deal with, including higher postal rates. Second, the mess in the Postal Service was aggravated on the financial side because there was this requirement that was passed by some Congresses before I got there, that unlike every other employer, the Postal Service had to pre-fund retirement and healthcare, not according to actuarial requirements about what was prudent, but they actually had to have pre-funding for your retirement or your healthcare, as opposed to have it done on an actuarial basis. That was putting enormous handcuffs on them financially. We finally changed that so that they have to follow actuarial standards as opposed to this artificial legal requirement, legislative requirements. So that's helped to some extent. That started to help, and then we came out post-COVID. COVID was wicked, and then we came out of COVID, and then there's this huge labor challenge. Then to add to that, there's some significant managerial issues, and you just mentioned one. You know, if somebody comes in and applies for a job, the turnaround time takes way too long. And that means that person who's applied for a job and needs a job, they can't wait 6 to 8 weeks to get an answer. You've got the job or you don't. So that's, I think, a major managerial issue. How do you accelerate that? And I love your idea of people being able to help. I'll give you an example. Our local country store is Dan and Witt's, and it's the heart of the community. This is Norwich, and we had wicked labor problems down there. And Dan Frazier, who's the wonderful man who runs this, put it on the listserv. He needed new employees, and a lot of folks came in and they didn't volunteer. They pay. A lot of folks came in, they had some time, they revered the store, and they started being cashiers and and helping out. So I love your idea. It's not the way we're going to be able to run the postal service, but it's all of those things. So we're doing all we can to keep the pressure on for better service and to ease some of these hiring challenges that really are that's our own impediment that we've made.
I
So thank you.
one of the Things that nobody seems to mention is like a lot of people saying, well, they're just people who sit at home and don't want a job. We lost over 1 million people to COVID,
Right.
and most of those people probably had jobs and they probably have been in them for a very long time. So we
Yeah.
can't, even if we had a replication of those people, you know, the numbers, trying to get that kind of experience is going to
Right.
take a long while.
No, it
So I don't
does.
know what the thoughts are in Congress of trying to address this shortage of bodies.
Well, by the way, the shortage of bodies is everywhere.
Right.
I mean, it is, you know, we're talking postal now and they got a shortage, but teachers, you know, nurses,
Yeah.
police officers, I mean, the crisis we have in local police departments is really, in first responders is really tough. And that's a post-COVID phenomenon that none of us have really fully figured out. Yeah. Andy.
I think this is the third or fourth time that I remember that you've come up with a little club, so thank you for taking time out of your schedule. So my question is, if you kind of assume that social media might be a contributor to the heat of the fire, what role, if any, does Congress have in trying to regulate that and kind of be balancing First Amendment rights and
You know,
making sure that
I am so glad you brought that up. There's two things that are happening with social media that are actually terrifying to me. You mentioned one is the misinformation. I mean, it travels now at the speed of the internet, and people clearly are very susceptible to conspiracy theories and alternative explanations, and it's done a lot to erode trust. The second issue that is increasingly terrifying to me is the mental health crisis that we're seeing, especially among our kids. And, you know, the number of kids who contemplate suicide is just terrifying. And the whole, you know, social media business model is these platforms create these algorithms. And the goal of the algorithm is to intensify interest in the number of clicks, and the more clicks they get, the more they can charge for advertising. And it's so there's a couple of things that I am working on, and I'm seeing an increasing interest by members of the Republican and Democratic Party, particularly on the mental health issue. And we just passed out of our committee the Kids Online Safety Act, which would impose some legal responsibilities about algorithmic intensification of some of these issues and put some responsibilities on the media company. I'm also on a very unusual bill. You mentioned Katie Britt. I'm on a bill with her and Brian Schatz and Tom Cotton, who's a very conservative Republican, that would actually ban social media for kids under 16, or pardon me, under 13. And that's kind of extreme, some people think, but I'm really concerned about what's happening. And, you know, I have a stepson who's got a 1.5-year-old, and he's terrified. He and his wife are terrified about what awaits them when their child gets to, you know, that age. So I believe we can take some steps to protect mental health. And I also think we can impose some responsibility on the platforms where they're, for their own business reasons, using the algorithmic intensification that does so much damage both to the mental health of our kids and to our democracy. It's a really tough issue, but you know what? It's real. I mean, it's just awful. I mean, if you're, you know, you're a young person and you're trying to figure out who you are, and all of us have some faint memory, and it's never a good one, you know, of how we couldn't kind of find our way. There's got to be some help in protection for our kids. So I think we've got to do that. And the final thing, we've got to create a digital agency that has the responsibility to protect the public interest and make sure there are public values that are a part of this extraordinary internet. I'm sponsoring legislation that would create that agency that would be properly staffed, properly funded, and it would have as its mission the protection of public values. Yeah. Yes, sir. What? Hi.
I was gonna stay on that.
What are we doing?
Okay, so staying on that topic.
Oh, yeah.
Europe handles the social media thing differently than we do. And
Right.
I don't know if anyone's ever really compared what's happening in the United States compared to what's happening in Europe as a result of maybe some social media. Is there any reason we're not maybe leaning on the social media companies to
well, there's two things. One, they're much more willing to use the authority of government in a regulatory way to protect what they regard as public interest values. It's always a battle here in Congress when you're talking about the use of any regulatory authority, because there's half of the Congress is against using regulation in any way. And that's a tool of government that can be used for the immense public good, but it can also be overdone. So, you know, how do you get it right? But that's a constant challenge. So they're different that way. The other is that, you know, when the US gave immunity essentially to the platforms with Section 230, you've heard of that, where whatever gets posted on their platform, they're not responsible for it like a newspaper is. So the Williston, you know, your paper, if you do something libelous, it gets in your paper, you can get sued. Well, if you're Google, you can't. So I understand that what the motivation was. It was to not inhibit the development of it. But what's happened is it's not just then posted, the algorithms then reposted. So there is a decision by the platform in the design of their algorithms about the promotion of something that was not their responsibility to get on the platform in the first part. And that's the distinction where I think there's got to be a much more responsibility among the platforms, because they make money on this. And again, I go back to this with the kids. I mean, this is so tough for all of our kids, where they're constantly being made insecure about their body image or how popular they are. All the things that kids have to contend with as they're growing up. It's hard enough, but to have that in your face every day. And then just this, you know, what disturbs me as well is just all that time on the screen instead of, you know, out playing and interacting. So that's a challenge for us.
Kids have access to porn.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. Yeah, no, you're right. No, it's tough.
Angela has.
If you just say.
All right, who's in charge here? Okay, who's in charge here? Yeah,
I heard my name, so I'm going to jump in if that's all right. Thank you so much, Senator Welch. I'm a state representative for our wonderful community, and I am hoping to introduce legislation in January that will prohibit social media companies from utilizing tools that make their products addictive for children, for kids, for youth, just as a starting point. Of course, state level regulation isn't going to be as effective as federal regulation. But I'm a parent of 2 teenagers, and just as a person existing in our world today, I really feel that this is imperative. I'm excited to hear that you're hoping to form a committee, a dedicated committee, because I fear what's next, and things like generative AI and tools like that will, to my mind, eventually just end what we know to be the truth. We won't know if something is generated by AI or a human brain. We won't know the history of the story, the facts, whatever it is. And I think that's really concerning for our democracy. So I hope that can that your committee can come to reality, because I think that the federal government lost track of this at some point. We haven't kept up with the pace of technology. It's really hard to keep up with, but we've all become subject to experimentation by companies just profiting off of our we just didn't know what we were getting into, I think, but now we know, and we have to do something about it. So I'm just wondering if you see, if you feel that it is in fact possible for the government, the processes to, is there any way we can keep up with the pace of technology, kind of catch up and then keep up to protect Americans?
Well, first of all, thank you for your work, and I'm glad you're going to be introducing that legislation. That's really important, and the state level leadership really has an impact ultimately on what happens in DC. So that's really good you're doing it. Second, the whole point of the digital commission is to keep up. What I've seen in Congress is that there'll be an issue on privacy. There'll be an issue on pornography. There'll be an issue on mental health, which is really galvanizing both sides. And there'll be a proposal for a bill to do this, to do that. And it feels like whack-a-mole. And the reality is you need an agency that has authority that is congressionally provided to be on top of it. It has to be well-staffed, it has to be well-trained, and it has to have the resources to be able to intervene and to set some rules of the road. You know, Congress has done this before. You know, when the railroads were ripping off farmers when in the 1880s, and they were just squeezing the farmers constantly. And finally, the way Congress dealt with that was not to micromanage the rates to deliver from Des Moines to Chicago. It was to set up an organization called the Interstate Commerce Commission that had essentially some rate setting responsibility. And it had to be on an ongoing basis. The Securities Exchange Commission was created in the 30s, and there was an immense amount of abuse on Wall Street with fly-by-night operators selling securities that had no backing. And the Securities Exchange Commission was set up to establish rules and regulation, rules of the road. It actually has helped out. It's then started to provide some confidence in the security markets. So we have that kind of situation now. It's exactly what you just said. We didn't know what was happening. We knew we wanted the benefit of the internet. Section 230 was passed. It then became kind of the Wild West. And now these successful media companies are gargantuan. They're bigger. They have bigger budgets and revenues in many countries, right? So that's the case that I'm making, and we're in the beginning stages of that debate. But you know, even just in this room, the widespread concern about what are the effects of social media on our kids, on pornography, on democracy, conspiracy theories, that's real. I mean, and we have to, as a society, be the ones who are in charge, not have us be the ones who have to take whatever it is works for the financial bottom line of those platforms. Yeah.
Question in terms of mental health, we certainly do not fund it in the way that we need to. And I was just thinking, as when we were dealing with our drug issues,
Right.
it would be nice if we could get some of the media companies to kick in to support mental health.
Well, that's called taxes.
Yeah.
Uh, I want to say something. I've been a strong supporter of mental health funding, and you need funding for mental health. But to take the opioid crisis, we're not gonna mental health our way and counsel our way out of that. These are like deaths of despair. People don't have a community. They don't feel part of something. They feel kind of dead end, and then they start making decisions to try to cope and manage that. And it's why I think, what you're doing and the Rotary does, where you're helping your neighbors, you're looking at what's needed, you're showing up and creating a sense for all of us that all of us need, that you're not on your own. So the key to better mental health is not just the person who's suffering having a counselor. Obviously, that's very important, but that person needs community. That person needs friends, not just an iPhone. So that's what's so important about the things we do in the local community. It's really just that glue that holds us together and helps us get through tough times when we need it.
I'd like to just add to that. So it wasn't really until, I'm gonna say, 5 years ago, and that's, people didn't even talk about mental health. It was, if you couldn't see a broken bone,
Right.
it wasn't real. So as an OT and a certified dementia practitioner and a mental health person,
Yeah.
OTs, we work a lot with mental health, in general,
Right.
in all the different populations, but you couldn't talk about
Right.
somebody being unhealthy mentally because we can't see it. It's only recent. So I think we're really are making progress, and at least we're talking about it. And now, we need to act fast. I guess a lot like the social media and all that stuff.
Staff.
Yeah, but I mean, at least it's getting talked about.
That's
So
really
on a
good.
positive note,
Right.
at least
No, that's really good. And of course, my colleague, John Fetterman, as you remember, and he had a tough situation. He had that stroke. He's got this situation where he totally, can talk, and he's totally mentally competent. But there's been an effect on his processing of verbal, and he reads it off a screen. But can you imagine? So he went, and he's got 3 beautiful kids and a wonderful wife, and he loves being home. He loves having dinner at home. He loves doing like normal things. And suddenly he's down living in a basement apartment. He's a US senator, so that's a big deal. But you know what? He's living in a basement apartment. He's separated from his kids, 4 days a week. He's having to contend with the effects of the stroke, and he was depressed. And he, I think, has done a really good thing for the reasons you're mentioning, where he just was very straightforward about what he had to deal with. He went to Bethesda, and I visited him. I saw him, a lot before he went, and then I visited him the day before he was coming home, and it was just so glorious to see this. John is back, and he's been very public and I think helpful in making that case that yes, we've got to talk about this. Yes.
What do you see about the flood recovery in Vermont and thinking on a national scale, just seeing more of these disasters from climate change and I
Right.
think all the federal aid that's going across the country, what the future means of that and how we can build our infrastructure.
Well, good point. Well, first of all, this flood has been terrible for the towns and the communities that got hit. My sense of it after Irene did much more extensive infrastructure damage, but in places that were hit, like Johnson, like Montpelier, like Barry, they got it worse this time. And it's just heartbreaking to see a family who has lived in a house like in Barry down on 2nd Street, all these very modest homes, low income homes, but their home is the home. and talking to this man who had been working on his garden and had just planted some new shrubs, and to see it under 2 feet of mud. And then that indicated 6 feet of water in his house, actually. And the likelihood that he's not necessarily going to be able to get back in that house, that's pretty hard. So there's been, the governor's doing a great job on this. FEMA's been doing a good job, and that's Governor Scott affirming that. And of course, Bernie and Becca and I have been traveling the state. Our job is to do all we can to make sure we get supplemental funding in FEMA, because the demands on FEMA are increasing for the reasons you mentioned. And of course, we just see these incredible fires in Hawaii. But the point that all of us are making, including the governor, and we had a conference call with him earlier this week, is that we do have to build back for resilience. I mean, this is not, these once in 100-year storms come, it seems like every 10 years or sooner. So after Irene, Vermont pushed hard to be able to change the then FEMA rule that if you had a 6-inch culvert, they'd replace it with a 6-inch culvert when you needed an 18-inch culvert. Okay. And we made the case then, and we succeeded. And Governor Shumlin had a lot to do with that. So and that helped us a lot in the storm, because there were a lot of places, including my road. I live in a dirt road in Norwich, and ours was wiped out after Irene. And when we put in bigger culverts and bigger drainage ditches, it's totally fine. So we've got to do that. We've got to build back with resiliency, and just accepting the reality that these storms are with us until we can bring down carbon emissions. Yeah, Ted. All right, one more.
I just have a comment, because I know my time is out. I've always been a very strong believer in leadership from the top down. Leadership sets the stage, I believe, for everybody else. And I am so grateful that you are a leader, because I want your attitude, your approach, your understanding of people and human behavior to spread wherever you go, because I do believe that leadership is successful from the top down. And I want to thank you.
Well,
That's a great.
the only, it was very kind of you to say that. But what you just said is also true from the bottom up. Okay, every one of us has to make a decision, right, about how we're going to face the day. And you can wake up and look at the gloom and doom that's out there, social media, climate change. And this, by the way, is depressing a lot of young people. Or you can face it and do your best. So I really appreciate what you said. And I think I do. Any of us who have a leadership position have a special responsibility. Okay, so I accept that. But I think all of us have that opportunity to make the decision about how we're going to face the day. Yeah, the problems are real, but you know what? Let's get to work. That's sort of the attitude. It's more fun that way. Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much for
Yeah,
being here. And Ted,
thank
would
you.
Explain how.
Senator, we, in your honor, we make contribution to the Wilson Central School Mentoring Program.
Great.
So that's going to go out in your honor. And if you have time, actually, we have a 50-50 raffle, and all the best to pick the winning ticket. And I gave all of mine to my daughter.
All right.
Pick her.
All right. So Ella, where are you at? Great. Oh, that's great. Cool. Great. Thanks.
I'll read the last 3 digits.
Okay. Last 3 digits. 430. 430. That's great. Congratulations. What? Well, this is great. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
By the way, thank you. Keep your eye on.
That is.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Marty.
Thank you.
All right, now for some basic stuff here after all that. We are not talking baseball today. Other than, where's our Orioles fan? Howard. You can talk about the Orioles if you like. We can talk about the Orioles if you like. All right. I'll leave my stuff to the end. Who's got? Just over here, right? Here we go.
Thank you. Have a dollar for the speaker. It's great to have someone like that in silence. Another dollar because I made it again. And a dollar for all everyone does.
Right. Is that money for us?
Yes.
I surprised you.
Start right off by saying, thank you so much for the great speaker, and we really appreciate it. I'm happy to say that my wife Sonia came today, and that's a good thing. And thank you to all those who contributed to the great breakfast we had this morning.
Yeah.
It was a nice morning.
Mr. Stewart.
All right. So I don't know if anybody too. If you did, I'd like to buy that from you. He's a good friend of mine. Yeah. You have to prove it. And a dollar for Mr. Welch. Wonderful to have him here, Senator. And a dollar for Sonia.
Right.
See ya.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot. Thank you.
$2 for Senator Welch. I'm so glad that he had the experience of being in the House and then moving into the Senate, because it really gives them much more of an understanding of a lot of different people. And the other $1 for my daughter, because she's a mental health counselor in Colorado, and her job is working with teenagers and young adults who are potential suicide. So that was an eye opener to know that there's enough need for that, to do that.
Like Barbara said, we need staff, we need trained
Right.
staff. We got one more. No, I mean our daughter.
Right. Susan.
Thank you for the great speaker, Ted, and for the great introduction to our speaker. And to all who pitched in for breakfast today. I think that's, yeah, thank
I
you.
didn't get a chance to ask my question, which was, is Marjorie Taylor Greene as nice as she seems? And the answer is yes.
Exactly.
See, I have a dollar for breakfast, the quiche, salmon quiche. I don't know who had it. It was excellent. Very good, Susan. Thank you. $1 for my phone ringing in the middle of the senator's talk. And $1 for Sonia. Good to have you with us.
Thank you.
Right, Vance?
$1 for Peter Welch and $1 for Ted for bringing them. Thank you very much, Ted. That was a great speaker. Really appreciate it. Before you go too far, we have Angela on the screen.
Angela?
Oh, thanks. I can't give $1, but I actually have a
You can write a
So
check.
next,
PayPal. We accept PayPal. I actually have a question or a service opportunity for our for folks who might be interested on Sunday, this Sunday, the 13th. I've been asked to help logistically with a project that's being led by Senator Rom Hinsdale and her group called the Queen City Saints. They will be hosting a back to school supply drive, kind of a fill a backpack event for to benefit families who have been impacted by the flooding in the last month, or I guess now we have August flooding as well, right? So if there is anyone who would like to be present in the Walmart parking lot on Sunday to help stuff backpacks, you can email me. I'll send an email out after this to the whole club, and you can reply to that. But I just, when she came to me and asked for help, I thought of our club, and I thought of all the wonderful folks in this club who love to lend a helping hand. So there are a number of ways that you can help if you're interested in that. And it's this Sunday again, 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. You can volunteer for as little or as few or as many hours as you're available. And again, I'll send an email out to the club, but just wanted to introduce the idea here. So thank you.
Angela, can you hear me?
Yep,
Angela, can you hear me?
I can.
Okay. Originally it was Staples, but it is Walmart where we're
Yes.
meeting.
Yes,
Okay.
there's a
Okay.
yep, there's
Thank
another, a different, there's a fillibus at Staples today. So we thought it wise to switch to a different retailer.
Thank you.
Do they need financial support as well?
Yes, that is another way that you can contribute for sure. And I can include that information in the email. I'll also be, I think Senator Hinsdale is going to post on Front Porch Forum today. I'll post Saturday to remind folks. So there will be a few different ways to get the information, but I will include all of it in an email to the club also.
Great. And if we're making out checks, where do we send it to or to whom?
I'd have to ask about checks. I think they've been mostly dealing with Venmo. They've been doing a lot of flood relief work and having folks send them money via Venmo, but I'm sure they accept checks. I just need to find out how, so I can find that out for you, Barbara.
Thank you.
Gary?
Thank you for bringing the speaker this morning. Good to see Peter again and for the wonderful breakfast.
Barbara, do you want to report for the winter?
I would like to give $2 for Peter's presentation, but I need change.
We can arrange that. Charlie? Ted?
$1 for the presence of my daughter Ella here. My honor student, incredible daughter Ella here. Not to brag. And just a $1, honestly, for democracy and process and all the stuff that Peter Welch was talking about. That, you know, he demonstrates, I think, again, what Kennedy said is civility is not a sign of weakness, and sincerity must always be subject to proof. So
Thank you, Ted. Howard?
Can I make this worth a few and take an IOU? So I was
Cut up a little piece.
I was away for a couple of weeks. I went and did my first ever golf tournament, and I don't golf for the record. But I can swing a club. So anyway, that was a lot of fun with my son-in-law, who did a fundraiser for local youth, and so I applaud him for his efforts. He raised some good money. And also this past week, I was at the beach in Delaware. I did not see a president. But we did celebrate my father's 87th birthday, and my sister thought it fitting to take him out dancing. He actually loves to do uncanny. And so he had a blast. We were in this place with, it was like a beach club, pounding music with 500 young people and really odd people out, but he had fun anyway. So it was good. And thanks to Ted for our speaker. He was awesome. Everything he was saying. Last thing, oh, the Orioles. I noticed that joke pretty good. And last thing is, I got myself an electric mountain bike. That is fun with a phone.
Debbie?
So, well, I actually have $1 for Vermont, because the fact that one of our US senators come and speaks to 25 people is really amazing. I have colleagues who do the same kind of social justice work that I do in other parts of the country, and I can tell you right now, the California affiliates cannot get Nancy Pelosi to go to anything, even with like 1,000 people. So we're really fortunate in Vermont. And then $1 for my sister being here and our vacation that we just took. Highlights were the National Comedy Festival. We wanted to do something just to forget about all the crap that's going on. And that was really good fun. It's held at the hometown, Jamestown, New York, the hometown of Lucille Ball. And that was good. And then I got to go to unfortunately was sick that night, but I got to go to a Guardians game. And they won, and I got to see a double play conducted by a single person. The second baseman got a grounder. There was a runner on first. He got the guy had just stepped off the bag and he tagged him out, and then he tagged first base to get the runner also.
That's nice.
I don't be impressed.
Well,
Thanks for being here, Sharon.
Sally.
Yep, so money for our speaker, for our guests, and
I have another $1 for Rick's poem that he read.
Yeah.
Thought that was terrific. And,
$1 for that.
we should all hold hands and.
Stay together.
Well, that comes in a lovely book.
Yes, yeah.
That was a great choice. All right, I think I got everybody. Thank you, Maureen.
Well, we need to leave up 4 tables and 12 chairs. We are adjourned.
All right.
there'll be leftovers if anybody wants to take them.